The world of men is ending. In the fires of Mount Doom, a ranger and a wraith, bound together in death, crafted the one thing that could challenge Sauron, a ring of power. But power can blind those who seek it. Celebrimbor! The great deceiver has returned to Middle-earth to rebuild his armies, to rule all. Their corruption will be contained no longer.
Sure. My name is Kevin Steffens, and I'm the studio head at Monolith Productions. And Middle-earth: Shadow of War is an epic third-person action-adventure RPG set in the Middle-earth universe, and it takes place after the events of The Hobbit, but before the events of Lord of the Rings, and it takes place exactly right after the end of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. So in this game, you play as Talion and Celebrimbor, kind of the Bright Lord is what we call the combination of these two characters, and you are building an army to go after Sauron, and you end up facing off against the Witch King and the Nazgul on this epic story. So we feel there's lots. It's a huge universe, and with after Shadow of Mordor, we left that game kind of on a cliffhanger. At the end of that game, Sauron, kind of escaped, and we, as Talion and Celebrimbor, we said we need to make a new ring to combat Sauron because he's too powerful for us without more power. And so at the beginning of Shadow of War, we're making that ring, and it's a new ring of power. So we feel that there's a lot of story left to tell. There's 60 years that take place between the end of the events in The Hobbit and the beginning of the Lord of the Rings. And during that time, especially in Mordor, it's like, what's going on in Mordor? It's 60 years. It's a long time. It's like, why did it take so long for Sauron to come out? And in the events in Lord of the Rings, it's like he's almost ready. He's got this big army. He's about to come out. It's like, why did it take him 60 years to build that army? And so from the way we look at it is, well, there had to be a reason. There had to be a reason that it took him so long. And so we create that reason. Like, you are the fly in the ointment. You are the reason it is taking him so long to come out. And really, the way we look at it is because Talion and Celebrimbor go behind enemy lines and keep Sauron busy, that creates enough time for Frodo to be born and for Frodo to ultimately, sacrifice, his finger and Gollum his life to, kind of destroy Sauron. And so, the premise from our point of view is you're critical. You're a critical part of the lore of why, Sauron was ultimately defeated. That's a hard one. I think that, it's very personal. Like, anyone that's a fan of Tolkien, has their own reasons for why they love Tolkien. And I think you could ask this question of every person on the team, and I think you'd get a different answer. And everybody on the team loves working on Tolkien. So I think me personally, a lot of it comes from, the more I learn about Tolkien, the more, because I'm not an uber, hardcore, the most Tolkien fan. I was, when I became the studio head, I was a fan of Tolkien. I had read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and seen the movies, and, I considered myself a fan, but there is much about kind of the inner workings of the lore that I had no idea about. So for me, I think working in this universe and constantly learning about new aspects of the depth of the universe, but seeing consistent themes that are still at play in our world today, that are just human themes. Because I do think some people that don't really understand the lore look at it as very simplistic. It's like Sauron's evil, Gandalf's good. It's just good versus evil, but it's way more gray than that. And there are some themes like corruption is a big one. That power corrupts, and that's the rings symbolize power, and that that it's a corrupting force. I think that you look around our world today, and I think that that's just a truism. And so that's what I like about it. I like that that even though the lore it has been around for 80 years now, or however long it's been, it's still very it still is something that is you find in everyday life. It still is very relevant. It's very human. Yeah, I mean, in Shadow of Mordor, and it continues in Shadow of War, there is the struggle within Talion of, he is very pure, he's very similar to, the character of Boromir, where, he wants to do the right thing, he's trying to do the right thing, and, even you could argue him not dying is that the right thing? Is him kind of partnering with Celebrimbor and trying to take on Sauron, is that the right thing for him to be doing? So there's always these kind of moral dilemmas in Tolkien that I think is really, really compelling and interesting. I think whenever you're working on an original game that is the first one, there's always a hope in the back of your mind that you're going to be able to keep working on it and create a franchise. But I think it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be able to make a sequel to a game. I think that the games, AAA games are large budgets, and they're complex, and they don't always work. They don't always succeed. And so obviously every developer wants to succeed and make great games. And so there was definitely a hope. I mean, I think especially when we got near the end, and that all these ideas and all these things that you were hoping would find a way into the game just didn't make sense, that you always are like, oh man, if we make a sequel, we could add all these things in. And so so making a sequel is great. We always hoped we'd be able to make a sequel. Yeah, so in the demo we showed, we didn't show, but we went through the world map, and there's 5 different regions that were talked about. So every region is the same size or larger than one of the regions in the first game. And the first game had 2 different world regions. And so, so right there, the world is much larger than the first game. It isn't a seamless open world. You can't just travel, go over that hill and just keep walking. That's not the way our technology works. Each sandbox is the way we think of it, is each region is its own sandbox. It has its own, kind of army, it has its own hierarchy, similar to the way the first game worked, but that we have many more regions. They're varied. Minas Ithil is a city. We had no cities in the first game. It's a city of Gondor. So it's, it's a city of men. And so it's under siege at the beginning of the game. And so, you get to spend a lot of time in this city region. We have Cirith Ungol, which is a region in the mountains, kind of just on the other side of the mountains into Mordor, which has a giant cave system, and it's a very compelling new region. We have Saragost, which we only showed the fortress in that region, but it's a full region. It's a full sandbox. There's ice caves, there's cliffs, there's all sorts of, kind of varied terrain in that region. And then there's Gorgoroth, which is at the base of Mount Doom. So you got this giant mountain, lava. It's, it's what you picture in your head when someone says Mordor. We have a region that really represents that. And then there's another region that we talked about today that is in Nirn, which is, we had a region in the first game that was in Nirn, but this is an island in Nirn. So it's a completely new region that's, green and lush, and there's a forest and, waterfalls. So we have a lot of variety of environments. Yeah, so the player can meet all of the war chiefs. The overlord is the only one that you have to assault the fortress. You have to kind of meet him in his terms, in his kind of boss chamber. But all of the other war chiefs, there are missions. You can pull them out of the fortress, and you can basically pick them off one by one if you want to, or you can convert them to your side, or you can give them a bodyguard that is one of your guys. I mean, there's lots of different tactics to kind of take down a fortress. And one of the more successful tactics is to take on the war chiefs one at a time. Instead of trying to take your army against their army, that's a challenge to beat them that way. But you can do it. If you have the right army and the right skills, you can just say, I'm just going to take the whole fortress down. Yeah, the way it's set up on the fortress assaults is there is always kind of an opening kind of setup where you get to meet the overlord and he gets his opportunity to say some things to you, and then you and or your followers have kind of a retort. So there is kind of an opening setup that is cinematic. And then as you're playing, depending on what happens in the combat, there could be other kind of cameras and mini cinematics, which is similar to Shadow of Mordor, depending on what's happening, where, a guy might say, and you might have a relationship with this particular guy, like, oh, you came back, you tried to storm the fortress, you weren't successful, you're going to try again, so there's definitely those kind of relationships. And then there's also the relationships between your followers and the other captains. So, your follower might be like, I have a relationship with this guy, killed me, or he killed my brother, or whatever it is. So there's definitely going to be some of those little, kind of cinematic moments throughout the battles. But, most of it is gameplay where you're just fighting, and you're taking out the war chiefs, and your guys are helping you take out the war chiefs. It totally depends on how the fortress is set up. So the dragon was actually a fire trap, and so if the fortress has a war chief that has that trait, that dragon will be there, but it might not escape. So you had to do something to make the dragon escape. And the other thing that happened that we don't show in the demo, but it's the Drake is what we call it, is once you shot the fire trap and the Drake escaped, you could have just let him go. Like, you didn't have to ride him. And he's going to do whatever he's going to do. Like, he might attack you. He might attack, the other AI. He's an AI with a mind of his own. He's going to do what he wants to do. I think we cover a lot in a small amount of time. I think the key thing for people, because we were just focused on the fortress assault, is that everything they love about Shadow of Mordor is in this game, and it's been expanded. Every aspect of the game is deeper and bigger and larger. The fortress assault is just one new mission type. The whole game is not about fortress assaults. That's just one large mission in the game, but it has a fully fleshed out story. It has fully fleshed out missions. The Nemesis system is back and bigger and greater. We have tribes, a bunch of different tribes. The first game basically had one tribe. This game has many tribes, and they all have different cultures. They interact. So the game's huge. Takeaway is the game's big.
The war for Mordor begins.